Peace, love, Goldn.Light. Today is Thursday, and on Thursdays, I like to share my reflection and different parts of my journal in response to the Write It Down series. So this week has been about intuition as well as understanding what you need to let go. So let's get into my response. You know what you gotta do now. Grab a pen, we about to write it down. You know what you gotta do now. Grab a pen, write it down. Let me start off by saying this. A lot of intention, meditation, thought goes into the Write It Down series. I spent a lot of time really putting the entire series together. So when it comes to the questions, when it comes to the style or different formats, I like to be intentional about everything that I'm doing. Now, the questions specifically, they come to me through prayer, meditation, and sometimes things that I'm inspired by, throughout my day-to-day. And it's so funny to me that every time it is a new theme for the week or new journal prompt, some way, somehow, something within my week correlates to it, right? I was in Tennessee a couple weeks ago, and my reflection actually layered into part of my reflection actually layered into what I journaled about for this particular prompt. So to start off with the first question, the journal prompt asks, what do you need to let go of, right? And I feel like there's a lot of times where I'm constantly writing out, I want to let go of this, whether it's something physical or something emotional, even something spiritual, right? And not too long ago, I had a reflection about this phrase, I release. I want to just make a point that for me, saying I release, I understand that it's not something that is going to instantly be gone, right? So if I'm writing, I want to release people pleasing, if I want to release the opinions of others, I know that the minute I say it, it's not really gone, right? And I don't like to get in the habit to think just because I wrote this out like that is gone. What I understand for myself is that statement, I release, and whatever that is an acknowledgement. I'm acknowledging something that I'm no longer wanting to serve. I'm no longer wanting to be, right? But it's going to take action. It's going to take honesty, and it's going to take work in order for that thing to be released, for that thing to let go. So even with letting things go, sometimes you find that you're going through this cycle of letting go of the same thing over and over and over. But it's really like little parts of it over and over and over. Because think about it. You may have been a certain way or done a certain thing for so many years, and it's going to take more time in order for those things to be released. But it's very important that we acknowledge what that thing is. So anytime that I'm writing I release, it's really an acknowledgement of what I'm wanting to let go, what I'm wanting to be released from me emotionally, spiritually, physically, or anything like that. Now, sometimes physically is much faster. So if I'm trying to let go of some clothes, I'm trying to let go of a physical thing, that may be easier for it to be gone. But there's still emotional and mental ties that's still there that we still have to let go. So I got me a new journal. I didn't just get it, but I be buying journals like all the time. So I always got like a fresh one on hand that I can use. And it felt good. Not only was this paper quality and the pen just on point, but it was a salt lamp. It was probably like 10 at night, and I couldn't sleep. And there were so many things going through my mind. And I was also reflecting about this journal prompt. And it's this tug that I have sometimes with myself, like, okay, you don't need to get up and write this down. Just, you'll remember it. But sometimes that's like the laziness of my flesh that's doing that. And my spirit was like, get up and write this down. And it was such a release that I needed, right? So I'm going to share parts of my journal as I always do, starting off with things that I want to let go. So the first thing I wrote is let go of control. Sometimes I get so focused on a certain way or rhythm, I hate for it to be disrupted in any way. It's it's like I find myself at either extreme. So I'm either hot or I'm cold, right? I'm either left or I'm right. And it's sometimes hard for me to be in the middle of something, right? So the same thing where if I'm focused on a certain path, I feel myself flowing in a certain rhythm, I start to get consumed with that way of doing something, right? And anytime I go too far to one side, something always pulls me back to ground myself, to find my center, to find balance, right? So that's something that I notice. I'm always at either end of some type of extreme, right? And I'm using hot and cold, left and right for an example. But the same thing happens with like when I find myself on a good, consistent rhythm, right? And I don't want anything to mess that up. And sometimes when things mess it up, I feel like it's not doing as good. And I had to ask myself, is that how you're measuring your success, right? Because consistency shows differently. And sometimes it's not always the same exact thing, but it's the same concept. It's the same pattern that stays the same, but then it starts to look different in different ways, right? But my thing is like the control with doing something one way is like, if it feels right, I want to stay that way, but it blocks me off from embracing different types of change, right? So I have to allow myself to be fluid. I have to allow myself to be flexible. And sometimes that's really easy for me to do. But then there's other times where it's not as easy for me to do, right? So I have to let go of this feeling that if one direction is a certain way, let go of the control to not embrace anything else, if that makes sense, right? So another thing that comes into play for me, which is patience. I'm very impatient, but I've been working on it so much, and I've seen myself patient with a lot of things, but patience is my forever theme. And that's something that I wrote about. It's like I find myself repeating the same level. I find myself in the same classroom, repeating the same grade, right? But what I'm grateful for is that each time it's a deeper understanding that I'm able to get that helps me to get to a new level. But on that new level, it brings out another form of patience that I need, right? So I'm grateful and happy for the growth that I have with patience, but there's still more that is being purged out of me, right? Something else that I wanted to let go, or something else that I'm working on actively letting go, is certain beliefs or patterns or ideas of certain things that no longer serve my purpose, no longer serve me in the direction that I need to go. So like I was saying earlier, a couple weeks ago, I was in Tennessee and I was meditating with the water, right? And I had this reflection where I had to just immediately do a voice memo. And it wasn't something that was completely new to me, but I was able to articulate a little bit more, where I was thinking about sometimes we experience things in our life that creates a war with what we may have been taught, what we know, right? And because what we know shapes our perspective, it shapes how we move, how we make decisions, how we think, that starts to get interrupted with this new experience that gives us something else completely different to think about, right? So it's so easy for us to fall into the habits because what we know and things that have shaped us becomes our comfort. It becomes habitual. It becomes something that is second nature to us. And even though this experience brings a new perspective, sometimes we don't have as much action with it to completely go in a new direction without thinking. And it depends on what it is. There's certain things that I've experienced that shifted my thought process, and it was easier for me to move forward with that new experience, with that new wisdom. But there's other things that are not as easy, and it creates this war within ourselves because we have this experience, we have this understanding now, we have this wisdom, right? But it doesn't really match the things that we were taught. It doesn't really match the things that we thought that we knew. So again, it was another area to become more fluid. It was another area to be more open, or to embrace that we don't really know anything, right? A man that knows everything knows that he knows nothing at all. So sometimes there's this war that goes on, and I'm not going to say what I have to do sometimes is let go of a certain pattern that is not fulfilling, right? It came, it shaped, it gave me something, but it's no longer needed here, right? There's no need for me to look at it in any type of way, but embrace it for what it was. But here is a way that I'm expanding, and here is a way that I'm evolving, and here's a way that life is giving me these new experiences that's giving me more things to think about, right? So that is something else that I found myself having to let go. And sometimes it's really easy and sometimes it's not, because the things that we think we know and the things that we were also taught that we maybe did not question at that time, it did shape me in some way. It shapes us in some way. So it's like when your world get thrown upside down and it's like, wait a second, none of this is true. And it's not that it's not true. It's just that as you expand, you can't keep holding on to things that are not fulfilling or things that are not of a type of purpose, right? So I want to go back to what I was speaking about when I mentioned patience, right? Every day I'm trying to practice patience in different ways, right? And I noticed that when we're waiting for something, that is a perfect time to then even be more present and give your energy or attention to something that is right there. So yes, this job, or yes, this situation, or yes, this person has not shown itself, it's not here, I haven't reached this level yet, but where I am right now is so much to absorb and take in, and it's so much that I can give my attention to, that let me learn from that. So not being so pressed on the outcome, because there's so much that's happening now that really does nourish, that really does teach, that really does help expand, that I can give my attention to, right? So even going back to personal development, there's a part of myself, or not even a part of myself, but there's Toya that I see in this type of light. But there's certain things that's happening now that I can't always be all of that, because I'm working through things that have happened in my past. I'm working through things that I'm acknowledging now that I need to purge or, remove from myself, right? And although I know this part of me is there and I'm so excited for that part and I want to just be that right now, it's like I have to go through these steps that are happening right now for myself, right? But each step is still the fullness of who I am, right? So there's no need to be impatient with that process. And there's so much that's happening now that I'm able to absorb and learn and still be the fullness of who I am, right? So like, for example, a big part of my life, I have dimmed my light. A big part of my life, I was really insecure, struggle with self-esteem and things like that. And now I feel like I'm at a better place where I feel good about who I am. And it's not that back then I didn't feel good about who I am. It's just that there were so many fears and different things that stopped me from showing up that way, right? So now that I reached this level and I know that there's still more work I have to do and there's still more things that I'm working on within myself, I'm still the fullness of who I am with each step. So each step is a part of this bigger picture that I keep seeing of myself, right? So that even is a part of patience that I reflect about and work through. And sometimes it's patience with a business. Sometimes it's patience with an idea. Sometimes it's being patient with people, right? And just being a place of understanding. So with the second part of the question that had me think about was intuition. Um, and intuition is something that I have personally been trying to strengthen. I have strengthened in a lot of ways because I needed to rebuild this self trust within myself. It's so easy for us to depend on other people sometimes, um, not being able to clearly hear our own voice, and needing to trust that voice that we hear, right? So a lot of things become more clear when I'm doing like a declutter, like a mental declutter. So the ways that I strengthen my intuition is through prayer, is through meditation, is through journaling, and different forms of stillness, being in nature. Um, Even though stretching is not technically like stillness because you're moving, is still like a mind and body connection for me, that even through stretching, I can get understanding, right? So my intuition is strengthened by doing these practices and then also following through with what my intuition is telling me, right? Sometimes when I don't follow through, it shows me how much more I should trust my intuition, right? It is that feeling that sometimes doesn't have to be explained. It's just a no. There's no question, there's no doubt, there's no hesitation. And every day I'm practicing intuition by things that I'm eating, who I let into my space, who I trust. You know what I'm saying? Because there's sometimes where like I go out and eat a certain thing or buy a certain thing and my body receives it. And I'm like, dang, I guess my body didn't need that, right? And it wasn't something that I had to research or go out and find or something like that. It's just something that came to me naturally and I trusted that feeling. The same thing happens with people or situations, in a way that you can read or observe your surroundings and what your intuition tells you about that. And sometimes you get it wrong. So just going through that practice of sometimes messing up helps to understand what that intuition is for me. Because nobody can teach me intuition. No one can teach me how to technically trust my voice, because at the end of the day, it is my voice that I have to get used to. And sometimes getting used to that is removing voices that are not mine. But sometimes you don't think they're not your voice. Sometimes you think it is your voice because you've heard it so much, and you have to realize that those things are from other people, right? So decluttering is also removing those voices and those thoughts that are not you, that are not the Most High. Um, and really getting to know yourself and what that means. And that's why these journal prompts and a lot of things that I focus on or I like to share is really getting down to understanding things for yourself, defining things for yourself. Because if you go through life depending on other people to define it for you, like I just personally don't want to live like that. There's certain areas of my life where I did, because it's just like, oh, whatever, like, you know, I trust you, you're doing it. But like certain things I have to know for myself. I have to understand for myself. Yes, we can still get wise counsel that's still valid to this day, that's still supported. But at the end of the day, I always knew, even when I was younger, that it's going to be up to me to define things. It's going to be up to me to make certain things or make certain decisions in my life. And I can't really always rely on someone else to be there. I can't really always rely on someone else to have the answer, right? So you got to work on trusting yourself. You have to work on leaning into your intuition and what that sounds like to you. And I know it's easy for us to absorb a lot of information through social media, online, but you got to also know when to fall back from those things, right? So everything is like within us to be that guide. And my objective is making sure that I can hear, because I know I want to know when to move. I want to know when I need to do certain things, and I want to be able to trust that and feel confident. So every day I'm working on strengthening my intuition. From simple things like, where do I want to go? And I feel like a lot of it is decision based. But there's so much stuff that's going on within ourselves that is actually our intuition. And sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's anxiety, sometimes it's somebody else. So intuition is love, correction, and direction. um Aromatherapy and sound is also another way for me to acquire a form of stillness so that I can hear. And sometimes when I'm in the moment of listening and hearing, I start to recognize shit that's not me. Shit that I'm like, dang, I've been looking at myself through a different lens. And the lens that I've been looking through is literally coming from other people. I'll give you an example. Not so long ago, I had a photo shoot, and it's been a minute since like I've been in front of the camera with someone else taking the pictures, because mostly like I take my own pictures, hook it up to a tripod or whatever. But I worked with a wonderful photographer. And as I was going through some of the pictures, I'm like, I already know I'm very hard on myself. Sometimes I'd be overly critical, right? And there's this one picture I looked at, and immediately I was like, I don't like that. And then I kept looking at the picture though. And as I'm looking at it, I started to hear the opinions of other people that I've heard over my life. You look stuck up, you look mean, all these type of things. Like if I'm not smiling or whatever, my natural face, for some reason, people always feel like I look stuck up, I look mean, I don't want to be bothered, all this type of stuff. But when I looked at the picture, these were the things that I was saying. I don't like that because I don't like how I look. Like, you know what I'm saying? And I was speaking ill of myself. But as I was looking at it, I remember the moment that the picture was taken. I was in deep thought, right? I wasn't angry. I wasn't upset. I wasn't sad. I just was thinking. And I started to say to myself, I was like, dang, but how can I say that about myself? That's not even true. So sometimes we attach things to ourselves as our truth and as ways to define ourselves because it comes from other people. But we know the true nature of ourselves and what we find or how we find ourselves in. So I had to dismiss that. And then the more I started to look, I was like, I have really strong features. My cheekbones, especially from my side profile, right? And sometimes we tend to look at ourselves wanting to look like something else, wanting to look like something that maybe is softer or whatever the case may be, because things have been said to me, right? So once I removed all that, I was like, I actually kind of like this picture. You know what I'm saying? I actually love this picture. So that's just an example that sometimes we have to remove those voices because that becomes the way that we also project into ourselves. And if it's not something that's true, it's not something that we should keep. It's something that we should let go. See how I came full circle with that? So different things help me strengthen my intuition, practicing decision making, digesting different lessons, isolation, self-trust, repeating, being in that same classroom over and over. Intuition is wisdom, it's knowledge, it's understanding. And the more that you use it, the better you get. The more that you trust yourself and find time to spend with yourself, the stronger it will get, right? And it becomes something that you can separate between this is giving me anxiety or this is fear that's speaking versus something that is innate, something that's just natural, something that's just like, I ain't even got a word for it, just like, you know what I'm saying? Like you just moving like, you just effortlessly flowing, you know what I'm saying? So there's so many more things I could possibly talk about letting go, but this was some of what I was actually writing. This was some of my reflection, even coming to intuition, So I wanted to share that. And even with the Write It Down series, I was thinking about it last night. You guys may see a little shift with it, but it's still going to be the same vibe, the same energy. But as I'm growing, the things that I'm doing grows. Because I realized that I want to create this pattern, this system, and be consistent with it, in order to create like a rhythm, a flow, especially if it's like sharing with people, right? But sometimes I have to shift, I have to change things because I'm changing, and I can't continue to do something that is not where I am in a sense. So yeah, expect to see some changes in a good way. The more I do this, like I used to not like being on camera and hear myself talk and stuff like that. And the more that I'm doing it, is the more that I'm also growing, right? I go from not speaking at all to now sharing my thoughts, and sometimes being even more personal than I thought I would be. But there's a part of it that has helped me on my journey as well. And it's not about, it's deeper than me just doing something to just go with a rhythm or a flow or something. You know what I'm saying? So I gotta stay true to myself in everything that I do. So as I shift and evolve, what I do and put out there is going to shift and evolve. And however that goes for me, I'm grateful and I'm thankful. I appreciate everybody that has been supporting me, has been encouraging me. And I'm just happy and excited to see where things continue to grow. Okay. So that's all I have for my reflection for this particular prompt. On Sunday, I will have a new prompt to share with you guys. And then I'm going to keep the Write It Down series going, as well as sharing my thoughts. Feel free to share your thoughts as well. I want to hear from you guys, like, for real. Like, I know some people may be hesitant to share. You want to watch more than you want to speak, and that's cool. But those of you who are willing to speak up, share your thoughts in a comment, in a DM, in an email, and let's vibe with each other. So peace, love, Goldn.Light. You know what you gotta do now. Grab a pen, we about to write it down. You know what you gotta do now. Grab a pen, write it down.